Hey, what's up, friends? Ray with Talking Timworks. How y'all doing? All right, so here it is. This is the follow-up video for last week's where we turned a couple of quarter sawn platters and put a coat of black enamel on the top of it, and we left them relatively flat. So stick around and see what we do with these platters. It's going to be interesting. Okay, so here we have the first of two platters that were turned with a convex, like a domed top, and I kind of left the middle still just the recessed mortise because it's going to be turned out. So what we did was we put a black enamel coating on top. And the reason for this black enamel coating is twofold. One, we are embellishing with Joe Sanja pearlescent paints, and they really need a dark palette to work with or a background. If this was done just natural wood color, the paint wouldn't show up very well. It's just the nature of this particular type of pearlescent paint that's acrylic based. It really needs a dark background to shine through. Otherwise, it will look kind of just like this milky white color. And it's kind of interesting because it's really hard to tell what you're kind of doing until it dries, right? It's kind of milky looking color, but that's the first coat that you saw me put on was blue, and now I'm mixing in some gold on top of it. The other reason why we used black enamel was we want this to be a very slick surface, okay? We want to be able to move this paint around. So what we've also done to make this paint viscous and movable so that we can play and design it is we added the Joe Sanja Flow Improver, which is a combination of acrylic medium and a flow improver. So what this does is it makes the paint more viscous, which means kind of more runny, more liquidy, and it also helps for it to dry slower. And as you can see, we can just move this paint around with our finger. And what's going to happen is as I'm pushing my finger up in this pattern, I'm moving the paint around, but where my finger is, it's going to be that black underneath, just the black base. And so we have moved the paint around with my finger, and we are now going to spin it and use the tip of my paintbrush to put another pattern. But this paint is thin enough where the centrifugal force at play of the piece rotating, the paint is going to slide across the surface in a clockwise direction. If I wanted to do this the other way, if I wanted the streaks to go counterclockwise to the clockwise finger trails I did, I would just spin this in reverse. Or if I really wanted to take the time out, I could have spun it one way, did one line, spun it the other way, spun one line, and so forth, back and forth. It's just, you can, the flow improver that we use just gives you so much time to play and move this paint around that it's really cool. And that's the critical step, is one, making this paint thin. Two is having a slippery surface where you could sit there and actually play with this paint for a half hour to 45 minutes doing different designs. And now you just see it right there. It's magically transformed. I use a blow dryer on low setting, 18 to 2 feet away, and I just let it dry. I let this dry for probably 20 minutes just to make sure. This was the first time using it, and I wasn't positive what the outcome would be. So I was erred on the safe. I didn't want to touch it because it's kind of puffy and a little bit three-dimensional. I didn't want to leave fingerprints in it. So once I figured out that it was dry, then I just used a rattle can lacquer This is cheap hardware stuff, nothing fancy, to put a protective coat over the paint. I don't want the paint to be marred or smudged as I go to turn out the middle of the bowl. If you don't put a lacquer finish on it or another protective finish, any little bump or it will tear if it doesn't have that hard plastic finish on it. So it's a critical step, and I put 3 to 5 coats of lacquer on this before I go to turn it, and I blow dry each layer because I'm impatient and I don't want to sit there and this be a multiple day project. I turned this, lacquered it, enameled it all in one day. So it's critical not to burn your lacquer and your paint with your blow dryer. Getting too close, you'll make air bubbles or you'll get runs in your lacquer. So don't spin it too fast and just be patient and let the agents do their thing and dry, and make sure you get a good finish, because you do not want to mess this up. If you mess this up, it's hours of work down the toilet, right? So take your time and get it right. And before I get ahead of myself, it's important that I state this and put this out here, that I got all this idea and almost copied Mick Hanbury's videos step for step. I got the ideas and the techniques directly from Mick, and basically redid his platters. And I did that because I wanted to figure out the paints, figure out the process, and I really did not want to spend a lot of time experimenting with myself. I wanted to try the techniques and make sure they work, and then from now on out, I will go out and do my own thing. But these platters get so many comments at my craft shows that I decided to go ahead and make the video for it. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm adding a layer of Yorkshire Grit Microfine. It's the polish. This is not the abrasive paste. And what my thought process is that will just knock down the lacquer a little bit and smooth it out and give it a beautiful finish, because I don't want to go through the steps of wet sanding. So I am using Yorkshire Grit Microfine in place of wet sanding to really shine up the lacquer surface. And I don't recall if Mick did this step or not in his video, but like I said, I like to one and done things and move fast, and I don't like taking a long time in the finishing process. This project drove me crazy, just having to go through 4 or 5 coats of lacquer, knock it down, buff it, all this. Whereas I normally will just sand something down and do abrasive paste, sand something down and just do oil. So I spent a lot of extra time that I'm not used to on these platters. But the end result is pretty cool. They look great. You know, if I do say so myself. My little finger designs are a little bit off, and those kind of bug me just a little bit. Just, you know, they're not totally symmetrical. But other than that, it's a pretty cool piece. So this part right here is critical, that you take your time and you do your entry cuts proper. If you get a skate back here, like, I don't even know what I would do if I got a skate back there. I probably would have just ripped the thing off the lathe and thrown it in the fire, to be honest. you know, because like you would literally have to restart over. You would have to return the face, get all the lacquer, enamel, all the paint, get it all off of there, redo the lacquer, redo the paint, redo you know, just, man, like I said, I probably would have lost it, and it probably would have flown across the shop and then went straight into the fire. But now this is where everybody's personal taste comes up a little bit different. This is where it's your personal eye, your kind of feel for art versus wood versus, you know, your brain will tell you what you like and what you don't like. So, because it's hard to say, it's how much of this do you actually want to be art, and how much of it do you want to be an exposed little wooden bowl. Um, that's a personal preference and a choice you have to make. What looks good to you. So I went with a small bowl and wanted to showcase the painting. And right here, this is a critical step, is you have to come back out to your edge and make sure that there's a wood boundary. So you have to clean up the edge a little bit, make sure that you just have the slightest amount of wood showing and your rim is cleaned up and everything looks even. Well, I like that. I mean, it looks good. And I think I take a little bit more out on the bowl and I move over to a 3/8 gouge to try and get a tighter finishing cut going in, a smoother cut, so I have to sand less. Because we all know I hate sanding, I hate finishing. So, you know, the better you can get with your tools, the less of that you have to do. So like I said, I can't emphasize enough of anchoring your tool on that tool rest, locking it into place with a good firm grip in your hand, and then making sure that your flute is closed over where you're comfortable at, and then make your entry cut and follow it around. Because one skate back and it's over. So what I did now is the cuts weren't bad, but I still just have that little bit of uneasiness about leaving little ridges and grooves, and I cleaned it up a little bit with my negative rake scraper. Even though I think the finishes were pretty good, it didn't take much from the scraper to clean up and move on to sanding. And that's just a Robert Sorby round nose scraper that I ground asymmetrical and put a negative rake on the top, just for, you know, feathering out and cleaning up round surfaces like that. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take any, you know, I'm not pushing in. I'm not really trying to remove material or shape. I'm just cleaning stuff up. Okay, so I saw Mick do this in his video and I wanted to try it. I do a lot of wet sanding with walnut oil, but I never thought to use a paste. And what I have here is a wood butter that I made quite a while ago. When I made my first batch of abrasive paste, I also made a separate batch of wood butter with it. And it's simply just beeswax and mineral oil. And so what I would use that for is just, you know, kind of restoring kitchen utensils, knife scales on handles, cutting boards, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, the mineral oil, I'm not a fan of, right? And I've just had this jar sitting around forever, so I figured I'd use it. Why not? And give it a shot. And so I just rub it into the edges and the stuff that I'm going to sand, and then I grab my little inertial sander. And so as you can see, I don't have my dust collector hooked up. I'm spinning at 1,000 RPMs. I'm spinning at turning speed. You can hear the little inertial sander zoom, and there is no dust. It's going straight down into the pile. And that's what the paste is for. It's a lubricant, and it also makes the dust heavy and fall down onto your bedways. And so I started with 120, 180, 240, 320, just like normal. And I only applied the paste right there at the beginning of 120. And I normally don't leave the sanding portion in my videos. I usually just leave a 5-second clip showing that I'm sanding and then I move on. But I wanted to show that this does in fact work using a wood butter or a wood paste to sand off your stuff. And like I said, this is mineral oil and beeswax. I don't see this piece as being used for food at all, but it is, you know, food safe, 100%. And by the time it's all said and done, the wax is gone and the mineral oil is pretty much gone, and you can just put anything over it. I believe on this one, I continue on with Axe wood paste and Carnauba wax. On the other platter, I do the same technique and spray lacquer over and had no problems with the finish. But yeah, just a little inertial sander. And, you know, it's kind of nice that you don't have to sand a whole lot because it's just such a small surface. The bottom's already been sanded, so I'm just doing the little bowl and the edge and kind of blending the edge together. This portion could easily be done with a drill and a 2-inch pad. It can be done by hand. The problem is you do not want to mess up and put a bunch of scratches across the surface. Man, that's the thing, that this wasn't a relaxing project. This was kind of stressful in the fact that if you kind of just casually mess up, there's so much that you would have to redo over that I probably wouldn't, and I'd just move on to the next piece. I wouldn't even try and salvage it. So, and these little inertial sanders, you can kind of lose control of them, you know. You kind of get it around in the shoulder at the wrong angle, and it wants to take off and fly out. So it was kind of a dangerous little game I was playing right here, you know. But everything came out pretty good. I often say it at work, you know, I'd rather be lucky than good sometimes. And so that's that. And I basically just cleaned this thing up with a little bit of paper towel to get some of the dust off the surface and try and make sure that there's no wax or oil left in the bowl or on the rim. Because I don't want any of that residual goop or stuff moving on to the next step of the finishing process. All you missed was I did a little bit of Axe abrasive paste. And now I'm going to do the first step, or no, the double Carnauba polish. You know, I'm going to put it over the top too, just so the whole thing gets the same type of finish. I don't know, I've never done wax over lacquer. We'll see what happens. And I'll just put some more back on the base, because why not? I don't think more wax is going to hurt anybody. Okay, at the time of this recording, it was late June, and this was one of my very first projects I did after breaking my back. It was very lightweight. I didn't have to pick up any logs or half logs or anything. I just had these little discs of 2-inch thick quarter sawn sycamore laying around the shop, and so I did those. What we did miss was the step where I used Axe abrasive paste on the inside of the bowl after sanding. So like I said, this was late June, and my camera really overheats in the summertime. It was struggling, and that's why, you know, you see me around in a tank top and all that. So what we did was, what we get to see is Axe Carnauba polish over the top, and then I went ahead and did it over the lacquered art piece too. So this piece was finished in both lacquer and wax. I did wax on the bottom and the bowl, and then lacquer on the art surface. And blue and gold, Michigan, and our local elementary and high school colors for Jefferson and Monroe. The thing with these paints is you don't really see them very good until you look at them top down, and then they really pop and look stunning. Like right there, you can really see the blue and the gold. When it's off to the side and not getting direct light on top of it, it looks kind of milky, like you see the medium versus you see the pigment. So I don't have the footage of me painting this one, which is unfortunate. I lost it somewhere in the move, and this was where I actually explained the mixing of the paints and everything else. So like I said, we're going to return to this type of project again and maybe do a little bit more in depth on the actual use of the paints. But this one was done with just one color. It was done with the green, and it's more of a sunflower pattern that was done with a round brush, and you just basically place the brush down low and then swoosh it up, and it makes almost a little cone or a flower petal. And I actually had a woman request me to do it more in yellows and oranges for a sunflower effect. So that would be really cool. But, you know, I moved away and was never able to go back to that craft show or mark it again. So this is another one. For whatever reason, I'm going with a deeper bowl, which was probably a smarter idea because the first piece that I did was pretty heavy. We didn't remove much material out of that bowl. I would say it could probably barely hold a regular size bag of M&Ms, if anything. It was shallow and not very wide. So the piece was relatively heavy. It never sold. Got tons of comments and looks, and everybody picks it up, and then they kind of noticed the heft in it. So I don't know. This one sold really easily. My neighbor saw it and wanted it and had to have it, and we went ahead and gave her a deal since we were moving, and she had always talked about my art and wanted a piece of it, so we hooked her up. But yeah, this one I'm playing with a deeper bowl, removing a little more material, and we'll play a little bit with some of the decoration in the turning. But this is just straightforward turning. You know, I've got my 5/8 bowl gouge. I do on this gouge in particular, it's 40 degrees on the nose angle, almost a 40-40, but what I do is I take the wings back further and give them more of a fingernail profile. And I really like that grind a lot. I need to do a sharpening video and show y'all how I do it. So if I had to guess whose style it would be like, I think it might be like Mahoney's, because it's also got a sharp nose. It doesn't have a really kind of flat round nose like Tommy and Richard's are. But it's a good gouge. I like it a lot. And that's something you just have to do yourself. You have to play with things, mess around. And like I said, I kind of combined Stuart Batty's 40-40 with a fingernail grind, so I can do draw cuts or pull cuts as much as I can do push cuts with it, and it works out to be a pretty good gouge. So here's a little decoration, and this one, I don't know what I was thinking using my big 5/8 bowl gouge right here for it, but it came out, and I like this. I like this thought a lot. If the painting pattern was different, I probably would have put a couple more out towards the edge of the rim. But since it's more like a sun or sunflower type looking pattern, I did not want to mess up the tips out there. And I figured that just going in at the base of them would look fine. And so I grabbed my 3/8 gouge to clean up that kind of V groove a little bit. and then come back and do finishing cuts. Because it takes out a little less material. It's a little bit easier to control, and this isn't a deep bowl, so I don't have to worry about overhang of the tool. And here's me trying to apply the paste while it's moving at like 1,000 RPMs. It didn't work out too good. So I stop, and we're going to shorten this up because this is, second verse, same as the first. We're just sanding. And then this platter gets a lacquer finish in the bowl and on top and on the bottom. It's lacquered all the way through. Whereas the first one had Axe abrasive paste and Carnauba polish, wax polish on the wood surfaces. This one is just lacquer all the way across. This project also is my first time using lacquer of any kind. I've never really used it before. So I didn't buy anything fancy. I didn't buy the Deft or anything. It was just rattle can stuff out of Ace or off Amazon. I can't remember. It was like Rust-Oleum or something. Now on this step, I am using the Axe wood paste to knock down the lacquer, and this is the actual abrasive paste. Now I can't recall if I just lost the footage on the other platter, but we didn't show this step on the other platter. We only showed using the Yorkshire grit fine. Now this is more aggressive at leveling out the lacquer, and I think it works really good. The Axe abrasive paste. It just works fantastic. And then, I'm also able to get down into that little groove, smooth things up. And what I will do, though, is since that this is a completely lacquer finished piece, after I use the abrasive paste, I will go ahead and put another layer of lacquer over it, and then use the polish, the Yorkshire microfine on top of it. And that really gave a pretty slick looking finish. And man, as much as I hate to say it, I think I may have liked this finish better than the wax finish. It came out really sharp. Just that extra little step, like I said, knocking the lacquer down with the abrasive paste, putting one more thin coat over it, and then polishing that with the microfine just made a really nice surface. And this piece, like I said, so it looks really weird from this horizontal angle. It looks, that's what I mean, what I say when it looks milky, like the paint hasn't dried. And you really can't see the pattern very good, but when it's top down and you've got a good lighting surface, like these really popped outside in the natural sunlight. They look fantastic outside, which is kind of a shame because most places they will be hung vertically inside, either on a platter stand or on a wall mount. So they don't get the full effect. They really need to be set on a table for the pearlescent paint to shine. But there it is. I really like this one. It came out cool. And I gotta say, thanks friends for watching and sticking around. Hopefully I will be getting new material out soon. I am working on the shop, and I hope to be turning soon this Thanksgiving weekend. So if you haven't already, hit the like, subscribe button, share on social media, do all that fun stuff. Thanks for hanging out with me, and we'll catch y'all on the next one, friends. Thanks. Really appreciate your support and your help.